All right, episode 10. Bit of a rebrand as well. Decided to change things up and go back to an old name we used to use, Run Fast. We speak about running pretty much every episode. Makes it a bit easier for both of us, given it's something we'll focus on for so long. Flicked you a bit of a note earlier, a couple of points to maybe discuss. May not get through them all, but where do you want to start?
Well, of those three, whether it's strengths or weaknesses or complications of coaches or Australia and track athletes, which one's top of mind for you?
Well, given the fact that I can do any, to be honest, they're all the strengths and weaknesses one is a really interesting thing for me because so many people, focus on your weaknesses. I've always been a bit opposite, go to your strengths.
Yeah, let's do that.
Cool. All right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I mean, back in the days when I coached and we ran together, I was always big on, if you've got a strength, really hone in and focus on that strength. Obviously, you can't leave holes in your game. But I think so many people try and, become something they're not and focus too much on something they aren't. But I think you really need to stay with those strengths and continue on with those strengths. And I'll give an example of probably coaching Anthony. His strength was clearly just his acceleration and his overall explosive power. He had pretty good back end speed, but, we just continued to focus on his main strengths and made sure the rest of his race was good as well. But I think you can apply that to life, right across many aspects of your life. I think sometimes we get too caught up in trying to be good at too many areas. Just hone down and focus on what you're really good at.
The difficult thing in when it comes to strengths and weaknesses, and this is from more of a coach's perspective, which I find it's a little more complicated than just picking one or the other. If I start from a base level, I've always come at it from the point of view is focus on your strengths and let your weaknesses kind of get dragged along, because they will improve marginally if your strengths improve. This is particularly to do with running. So if you focus on all your strengths, then those little weaknesses get a little bit better. But I found in coaching, if you focus on your weaknesses, like a great example of this, and we had this conversation on the track literally days ago, because I got chipped by an athlete said, "You never spend any time on my start. You're always doing every other element of the race except the start." And I said, yeah, and I had to acknowledge that's absolutely true. I do that. That is the way I coach. And I said, but I'll explain it to you. And then if that's not something that suits you, then I'm happy to shift. But I'll tell you my logic is that your start, and this is for one particular athlete, by the way, this could change for others. I said, your start isn't actually that bad. It's not great, but it's okay. Like you get out okay, but your strength is when you're up and in your running. So I'm focusing on everything that happens after the first 20 meters of, say, 100 meters. So that next 80 meters, I want that to be as strong as it could possibly be. And I'll give you a great example. It's his training partner who runs 7.5 seconds, and he did run a 7:42 last season for 60 meters. Can't beat me over 100. And my best time last season was 7:75 for 60. But he can't beat me over 100 meters. That's the reason, is because I run him down every time. He absolutely buries me out of the blocks, and I'm staring at the back of him for 80 meters. But the last 20, he's done. He folds up like a deck of cards. So here's the interesting thing with this particular athlete, and I told him this, do I focus on his start, which is his strength, and make that better than it is, and I don't think it can get any better, or do I focus on his back end?
Yeah.
So there's two completely different athletes. One has a better back end and an okay start. One's got a brilliant start and no back end. Where am I getting my best bang for buck out of those two athletes? And it's training them completely differently in that regard, is that with, say, Simon, his name is his start, I do a little bit of start work with him simply to keep him happy because it's his best thing and he loves it. And it keeps him sharp.
Sure.
The other athlete who gets none of that wants it because his start's only okay, but he's running almost the same 100 speed.
Yeah.
This is where the coaching aspect becomes tricky, where you've got to say, well, where am I putting my time? And then the other, and to overlay it with another layer of complication, then they have to go into a squad and run together.
Yeah.
And as you know, when we trained all together as a 400-meter squad, we had very, very varying strengths and weaknesses within that squad, but we still a lot of the times had to cross over and run a similar session.
Yeah, and that's where what you're saying before, your weaknesses will get dragged along when you've got, particularly in a squad, you'll get that mix of people you'll get dragged through for sure.
They absolutely do.
I think it's a little bit different in 100 meters because if you have any holes in your game, that you do get pretty exposed.
They show up.
Yeah,
Yeah, they do.
yeah. So, and I would say in that situation, particularly when it comes to racing, if you know the athlete that you're racing and you know he's an extremely good starter, but your back end is actually a better part of your race, that could be somewhat of a psychological disadvantage as well, because I know someone like, for me, and you've probably done a good job of this because the back end of your race is so much better, but if I knew someone was extremely good starter and the back end of my race, I'll make it up. If they put enough pressure on me at the start, you tie up so much that it doesn't matter about the back end of your race.
True.
You know what I mean? And then the vice versa, where someone that is actually, not a great starter, that they think to themselves, oh, if I don't get out somewhere near this person, I may not catch them. So if I'm not in touch at the very start. So I think with 100-meter running, it's a little bit different. I think you need to be more across the spectrum. But I think back to your point you made before, with kids in particular, you've also got to focus on what they really enjoy. Yes, I understand. We go back to someone like Marty Lynch, that all these guys could start, but very few of them could finish.
Oh, yeah.
He was just such a specialist, starter. And I understand they did it for beach sprinting, but they probably spent a little bit too much time in that particular space.
Well, they did. That's all their focus was there. And their results all ended up there as well. And I know, and talking about 100 meters, that's an interesting example. If you go out again to 200, it changes again because, last year's Nationals, when I had two runners that I knew were great starters, were better than me. So my strategy was, rather than, I knew they were thinking, we've got to be with Chris into the straight or we won't catch him.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually let them come to me, but because I knew they were going to push anyway and bury themselves. So I let them come to me just as we were turning for home. I just let them run up even with me, and they were tense. I could feel their physiology next to me. They were all out, and I was in quite relaxed. And then all I had to do was push a little and put a stride on them, and all hell broke loose. They were just all arms and legs.
Yeah,
and just easy. But that comes with race maturity. That's knowing your competition and race maturity.
For sure.
When you've done a lot of racing, you get in a race and you don't panic. And
I think focusing on your strengths also gives you the ability to train quite hard because
yes,
it's enjoyable. Like, everyone likes to be good at something and actually do things they're good at.
That's a standard across from a 1-year-old to an 80-year-old.
100% right.
People gravitate towards things they enjoy and move away from things they don't like doing.
Yeah, it's just natural part of life.
That's just what people do.
And even if we cross over to business, if you're not good with numbers, you can outsource all this stuff. You might still need to know what a profit and loss is, but you can actually outsource the actual detail of the spreadsheets and building the model, right? Yeah. You don't need to be really strong at every aspect of your business. So, yeah, I don't know. Just for me, I think sometimes we can get caught up too much in all of our weaknesses, and I understand you still need to bring them up to speed. One thing I got exposed when I was playing football when I was younger. Australian rules, you kick the ball a lot. I was not a very good kick at all. But I still got to a reasonable good level in football because my strengths were so much above other people that I got away with it. My two big strengths, which I think I could expose a lot of people, was I was relatively fast as a football player. I would consider myself a slow sprinter, but a fast footballer, and I could run all day. So all of a sudden, I got a lot of possessions. I could get to the ball all the time.
Yeah.
My delivery and disposal of the ball was not where it should have been, but I still did okay, even though I had, a bit of a hole in my game. So, and I just focused more and more and more on that strength that I could actually run for a very long time. I could run for the full 25-minute quarters. So yeah, it's an interesting one to really, as you said, to get right.
Well, one of the really interesting things, and there's two great examples of this, with two great sprinters, is can a weakness become a strength, or can a weakness become even weaker again if you try and train it and change it? And there's two great examples of this with two of the best runners and in the United States. And interestingly, they were both 400-meter runners. One was Michael Johnson. Now, he had terrible trouble with his hamstrings because of the way he used to foot strike. And so Clyde Hart got hold of him and completely changed the way he ran. So he had a terrible weakness that then became a strength. And everyone knows he had that very unique running style where he's very upright, it looked quite robotic, but it got him around the track in two world records, which stood for a long time over the 2 and the 4.
Yeah.
So his weakness became a strength, and that worked. And then you look at another 400-meter runner as a female called Dee Dee Trotter. Horrible upper body mechanics. She used to roll like this, roll her arm across her body. It looked absolutely terrible. The coach was smart enough to not train it.
Yeah.
Left it alone. She became a 49-second 400-meter runner. And she ran, it was just a lower body mechanics was spot on. Her upper body mechanics, it looked like she'd been in a car crash.
Yeah.
It was terrible. But that's the difference between a Michael Johnson and knowing that weakness, if we don't address it, you'll never be any good. You're just going to be injured all the time versus leave that alone. We can still get to our destination and not worry about that.
Yeah, and you see this a lot in the middle distance races, I think. And, one of my favourite races to watch is either the 8 or 15. I think even probably the 1,500 metres is one of the best races to watch, where you've got an athlete that is can maintain that really high pace, for a long period of time, where the other guy, then you've got a massive kicker in the group. So you've got this bunch of guys that go out there, and you've got one guy that can run, at that really high tempo pace and just hang on. And then you've got another guy that's actually a really big kicker. Well, yeah. The guy that's got the really big kick, if he goes out as hard with a guy that can actually maintain that really hard pace, for the 4 laps and tries to sit with him, he can't kick. His kick gets taken out of him, right? Because he's blown himself up.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, if the other guy sits back and doesn't try and use his strength at the start and actually put the pressure on the whole field and sits with the kicker just comes straight around him. So, and a lot of that, no matter how hard you train, some of that is just purely physiology. You can't get any better. Like the guy that's actually got the really high pace for multiple laps, he'll probably never have a good kick. He might improve it slightly, but he'll never kick like some of the other guys.
Yeah.
So I think this is where we can get caught up. We can actually make these mistakes. And a lot of athletes need to, I think it's really figuring out the athlete's strength and then developing their race strategy around their strength. As opposed to trying to really, really change that.
Well, that's what I mean. That's my philosophy. And as you know, and this is interestingly thing about sprinting, say for athletes between 60 and 800, even up to 1,500 meters. You don't, as you know, as kids go through high school and they figure out what they're good at, the event picks them. They don't pick their event. So you just gravitate towards what you're the best at. So, and often with sprinters, genetics plays a huge role in that. I mean, your kid just doesn't wake up at 17 unless he's just never run and go, wow, I didn't know I was so fast.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. And even a kid who can't run doesn't go to training for a year and become fast. They're born. You've got to be born fast. So you can improve, but you'll never be good or elite. So whereas, so once let's say a kid, like I've got a runner now that she's trying to run a better 800, but she's really a 1,500 meter runner. And how do I know that? Because every time she adds a kilometer to a race she might do, especially in cross country, she gets quicker.
Yeah.
As soon as I bring her down and put a bit of speed in, it's no good.
Yeah.
No flat speed. and she's not going to develop any flat speed. It's just not in her. She's just not that type of athlete.
Yeah.
But she can roll along in almost sub 4 minute K pace now forever.
Wow.
Yeah. She's only 15. But she
It's like
flat speed. No, it's not there. So 800's not really. She can probably get down. I reckon she might get down to about 210, 212, but that's not good enough.
no, that's it. And that's the tough decision you've got to make, isn't it? You've got to just decide, do you want to just run at that space? If you really want to put this amount of effort into training, as you said, you've got to pick the sport or the race or the event that's actually suits your physiology from the get-go.
Yeah.
And I said, same thing with the 8. It's a really good point about the 800. So many people don't realize, particularly probably when you're a bit more of a novice and maybe haven't had a lot of experience, that the 800, you actually have to be fast, very fast.
Well, you look at Mike. When Mike ran his best 8, he was running sub 25 200 meters, and really quick. And he's 400 because he beat me. He ran a 53.60 something at a state or national championship. So that's what's required. Truth be known, I know Mike couldn't hold that speed for very long. He would have been. I think he would have actually run a pretty good 1500.
Oh, he would, but it was he had the luxury that he came from, marathons all the way down.
Oh, he did. And
so he had
he could just
enormous cardio and just enormous grit, right? He could just hang on and just hurt himself.
But his best rep of the night was always the last one.
Yeah, always.
Was one hanging on like a cat off a tin roof, and his last rep, he's just flying. He just warmed up.
What does an elite 800 meter run these days for 200?
Oh my God, they're going to be absolute elite. The really good ones, they all run the 22s.
I was going to say, because I recall being somewhere, it must have been in Melbourne years ago.
Elite 21.
Yeah. I remember a coach, it might have been a seminar or something I did online, and the coach was basically saying that, he has all these other coaches bring these 800 meter runners to him, and he's like, can he run 22 for a 200? And then, well, that's what he needs to be able to do to run at this level.
Yeah. Well, Radisha, as you know, he ran 45.5 as a flat 4.
Yeah.
So he's running sub 11 for his 100. Sub 11. And he's running 20 point high for his. That's getting very close to a qualifying standard for the 200.
Yeah.
He did at the time qualify for the 4 flat 4.
Yeah.
But it's 44.9 now. The times have come down. But you need if you want to be in that sort of league, that's the flat speed you need. Even the girls now in the 800. Some of them are banging out their first 200 in a 23 high.
Yeah.
First 200. That's where they're going. So if you can't do that flat speed just as a one-off, you're certainly not doing it in the first 2 of an 8 and hanging on for 600 meters.
No, that's for sure, right?
So and a lot of people don't, and especially parents, do not understand what it means to get to those levels, because every parent turns up with their kid thinking they're going to be an Olympian.
Yes, but I think this leads me to another idea or something I just keep seeing online. When people talk about go out and do a sprint session and just go and run, 5 100s in your session tomorrow at 100%, and they're a UFC fighter.
Oh my God.
I see a UFC coach say, oh, we're going to do sprints today and we're just going to do 100% 100s. And I just think to myself, like, I wouldn't go and employ, if I'm a sprint coach, I wouldn't go and employ a UFC coach, or, I wouldn't try and teach my athletes how to do jiu-jitsu.
No.
I would go and get a jiu-jitsu coach.
Yeah.
Why do some of these other coaches all of a sudden think they understand sprinting and you just go out and you run 100%? And I see these trainers online all the time. People that I honestly believe are highly educated, I've looked up to for a very long time. They've been around for a very long time. They're still super healthy and they're in this health and fitness space. And they talk about all the time, oh, yes, one day a week I do my sprint training. I go out and do, flat out runs. I'm like,
they're kidding themselves.
Yeah. You
I see.
don't actually understand what that actually means.
No, they don't. And Dad, when we're at the track all the time, we see CrossFitters come down and
Mm,
try sprint work, and then every now and then one will wander over to me and they'll ask. They'll go, I was just watching what you guys are doing, which is not what we're doing, but we think we're doing what you're doing. So because we're supposed to be down here doing sprint training, and it's we don't know what we're doing. And I said, and they're the ones that are at least smart that'll walk over and ask, because it's clear they don't know what they're doing. Um,
yes.
but but as you know, it's the sprint work is a very, very small bubble, and it's and the rails around that are very narrow. It's a very, very specific type of training that I would arguably, unless you sit in that bubble a lot, you just don't understand it.
No, people don't understand. And we had this conversation so many times about people that actually haven't sprinted also don't know how to actually use power properly. I mean, and so many times we had 800 meters runners come and join the squad, and we're talking about, just masters 800 meter runners, so not elite runners, which I'm sure they know a little bit more about it. And they could run 200s with us all night because, they do this horrible rolling start, then just sort of gallop around and say, there's my first 200 meter rep. They
Yeah,
have no idea about how much power it actually takes to produce and how you get that little bit more out of your body. But yeah, it's interesting just seeing a lot of these sports. I did have an introduction when I was really young as well, playing football. They just started to actually bring the occasional sprint coach to the track,
yeah,
to football training. It was
yeah,
pretty rare. And I remember this particular night, I was trialing with an AFL club for the pre-season, and I used to run track as well. And the coach pulled me inside. "Oh, are you a bit of a runner?" And I said, "Yeah, I have a coach and do a bit of stuff." And it was very clear, just when we did drills in particular, everyone gets found out doing sprint drills. But yeah, it always amazes me that some of these other coaches, why don't you just reach out? Because everyone's really friendly in the coaching space, particularly when you get to a higher level. I mean, people are happy to pass off knowledge. Why don't some of
I,
these other coaches that want to go out and actually do? And I follow a lot of the UFC fighters, and they go out and do hill sprints. And I'm
mm,
like, if you just got someone to help your athletes out in that space, you might be a good boxing coach and a good jiu-jitsu coach, but you definitely can't teach an athlete to sprint up a hill. It's terrible.
no, no, no. And the other thing that they don't understand, even though they'll say it out loud, is they actually don't know what 100% means.
No,
They don't know what it means. They say it, but they're never at 100%.
no,
They think they are.
yes,
They're just because they think they're putting in effort. But it's so far beyond. I get this with athletes all the time when they say they'll run around and they'll go, and I'll say, "What percentage do you think you were at then?" And that's always really high. And I say, and I just shake my head, and then I say, "Right, now we're going to go do it again." And we're going to do it. And now you have to get beside me. And you're going to just hang on to me. And then they see it, and then they feel. And I said, not only did you learn what 100% isn't, but you actually found out when you do it properly, there's a lot more. You have a lot more to give.
yeah.
And a lot of people who don't understand that kind of work, and this is why sprint training is so hard and it tips so many people over, and people figure out they don't want to do it. This is what else it figures out, is because they realize it's actually way harder than they've anticipated.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, that understanding percentages, and we obviously ran to some crazy percentages, when I try and explain to people that you could give an athlete, today's session's 85% or it might be 92%.
Yeah,
They're like, 92%. I'm like, funny
yeah,
enough, athletes, when you've been coaching for a long time, athletes actually know what that is. They
they do.
know that little bit more percentage.
Yeah,
Um, that, with a distance running, let's say, as a marathon runner or an 800 meter, maybe not so much eights because you really do need to know percentages, but you more go by, zone training
you do.
and your heart rate.
Yeah.
And it's even for me right now, because I've gone back to running, more distance, I will tick along and I will actually look down at my watch and see what my heart rate's at. And
Mhm.
even if my pace is a little bit slower than I wanted to go out and run today, and I mightn't have had a great sleep last night or whatever it was, my heart rate will be a little bit higher. I'm carrying some fatigue from the week. I'll slow the race down. I'll slow my running down because I'm trying to stay within a certain heart rate.
Mhm.
But that's a really tricky thing and that takes a long time to learn, that percentage running. But there's no doubt, even think about a UFC fighter, they're 5-minute, 5-round fights.
Yeah.
Nobody can go 100% for 25 minutes.
Oh, no. Oh, my God, no. And you even know when you see bursts or flurries in those events, it's quickly followed by periods of not doing anything.
Holding on and doing nothing because now I'm so spent. Exactly.
I'm so gassed. And
yeah.
And I've done it. I mean, I've done some Brazilian jiu-jitsu and some wrestling and that. And because it's not my thing and I don't practice it, you gas out in seconds.
Oh, of course.
It's so difficult. And anyone that's done a bit of it, and if they know that, and this used to happen to me down in Brookvale all the time when I was wrestling down there, is they just had to wait me out, and they didn't have to wait long.
Yes.
But
every sport is difficult if you're not conditioned to it, right?
Yeah.
Go and try and run a K at 4-minute K pace.
Oh, I can't do it.
No, it's, as we were saying the other day, go and try and ski erg at 4-minute K pace, or go and try and roll at 4-minute K pace. If you're not used to that mechanic and haven't actually trained your system, everything's hard, And
I went in an over 65s hit session at the gym, and I was gassed out after 15 minutes.
Yes.
And all the 70-year-olds were laughing at me. And there's no point in me explaining to them, well, this is just not what I do. So I just I can't keep this up.
No.
But and it was, because my event only lasts 50-odd seconds.
Yes, yeah, and the percentage, it's different. It's different, right? It's just so different.
All different. So it's just one of those things. But I mean, last night's session, it actually tipped me over a bit because we had 4 250s off 2-minute rests, and they were solid, like 36.5 to 37.5.
Off 2 minutes, yeah.
2 minutes. I got to the last. That's 1K of work at good speed, and the first, and we had there was 3 meters of headwind for the first 100 meters. It was tough. I got to the last one. I was hurting. And then we had 500s on walk back in like 53 odd second 400 speed. So in the 13s.
Yeah.
And that was like at the end, that was 1,500 meters of work, which is right at the top end of my meterage.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a bit over. It's probably a few hundred meters over the meterage I should be doing. Mm-hmm. But we were doing some more in speed endurance and fast work for an 8 runner, and I'm not an 8 runner.
Yeah.
So his last reps, he was improving, and I was, again, like I was with Mike, I was hanging off a clothesline, just like even the coach. I got a bit annoyed. That's when he looked at me and he goes, "Oh, mate, it's a tough day for you." And I said, "Well, yeah, because I'm not an 8 runner." I said, "You know that. Like, I mean, I'm actually probably 2.4 or 4.2, depending on the season. I'm nowhere near 800 meters, not even close."
Yeah.
And they want me to time trial him next week. They want me to come out next week in an 8, run around. As I said, take him around in 60, 62, and then lift him to 500, like get to work and start to, and because we want him to go the next 200 meters in 32. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, I'll get him around in 60, 62. Yep, I'll hang on for another 100. I'll set his speed up, and I'm done. Like, that's it. I got no more to give. He's on his own after that.
Yeah.
So it's just like because they want him to run 205, 207 time trial. Like, I can't do that.
No, that's fast.
It's not going to happen. But I'll get him to 500, and I'll be done. I'll be like, I've got to step off. And hopefully he's got the rhythm by then. He's got that speed dialed in for that 200. I already know what's going to happen at 600. They want him at 600. His father said, I want him at 600 in a minute 30. And I said, we can get him there, but the next 200 meters, he's coming home in 40.
Yes.
This is a train wreck. You are going to see a train wreck. I said, get him up there in 134. He'll have something to give coming home.
Yeah.
But he'll have nothing to give at 130. He will be absolutely redlining. And he said, yeah, but he's only got, this is how stupid people are. He's only got 200 to go. He'll hang on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I said, you have no idea how much physical pain he's going to be in at 600 if he does that. Every step he's going to 200 meters is going to look like 10 miles.
And physically, he may not be able to even go past it. That's it. His body may just start to completely pack up. Yeah.
He could stop.
I mean, there's a limit. You can say I'm going to hang on, but maybe you actually just can't. Your body just cannot do that. I mean, what you need to say to this guy, I tell you what, if he can do that, you go and tonight when you get home, go and hang off a chin-up bar for 2 minutes. Just hang there for 2 minutes. You time it and tell me if you can make 2 minutes hanging on the chin-up bar.
I know.
Or tell him 2:15 the same time. If he can run this time, you hang on the chin-up bar. And I guarantee if he does not do that work, he will not be able to hang on a bar for 2 minutes.
No.
He's forearms and just said, well, what happened?
Yeah.
Something gave up, right?
Yeah.
Something gassed out.
And it happened to me in the only 800 I've ever run in my life, which was at SOPAC that one time. My instructions were go around in 60 seconds and for the first lap and just hang on. So I did. I went around in 60 seconds. Guess what I came home in?
80.
Yeah. 2:25 was my finishing time.
Yeah.
After running the first lap in 60 seconds. So,
and you were just hanging on though.
And that was, And
for grim life.
I was hanging on after 500. I had 300 to go. And that's the stupid is that you can just hang on, but hang on's still a train wreck.
Yeah, exactly.
You're coming home, you're burning so much time.
Yeah.
You're kidding yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
But people, as I say, who don't sit in that space, don't understand. They just do basic math. They go, well, in their brains, A plus B always equals C. Always.
Yeah.
If you get here in this time, they go, I don't understand why you just can't. It's only 200 meters. What's wrong with you? And it's like, and that's and I always describe it in this way. I always say, me having this conversation with you is like having Stephen Hawking explain cosmology to me.
Yeah.
I have no idea what he's talking about, or quantum mechanics. And I never will. And I'm not interested in it. And this is how I feel when you say things like this to me about why doesn't he just hang on with 200 meters to go?
Yeah, exactly.
And I said to him last night, I said, it's literally, imagine someone running behind you for 200 meters and pushing 2 steak knives into your thighs for every step you take. And me how quick you can run 200 meters, because that's what he's going to feel like.
Or like adding 10 kilos worth of weight to you every 20 meters.
Yeah.
Just have another 10. Another 10.
Throw another bag on the shoulders. Here's another bag, and just hang on.
Because that's what it feels like.
Yeah. But like I say, it's like, and you know this as well, because you've been a good quality runner in your career. Unless you feel it, how do you describe that? How do you explain that to someone who's watching it, but can't feel it and doesn't know what that means? It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and that's we might call it a pod in a minute, but that's a good segue for another topic and another day is the difference between coaching when you've been an athlete and just being a coach and never actually being an athlete and actually gone through some of that. I personally don't think I could have ever coached without doing what I've done on the track.
Same.
I really felt, and I know some guys do, Usain Bolt's coach, I'm assuming, has never run. I don't know if that's factually or not, but he doesn't look like he ever has.
He hasn't lately, that's for sure.
No. And I'm sure there's plenty of good coaches out there that have never played the sport. But for me personally, having that knowledge and knowing what the athlete's going to feel like in these particular situations was imperative to me to being a coach. So, yeah, we'll leave that one for next time. We can actually discuss that a bit more. But all good. All right, we might leave it there. Right. That's the pod. That's a wrap. Have a great day. See you, mate.